Jonathan, thank you so much for joining, my friend.
Very welcome.
So, Jonathan Klunk, for everybody, you wear a bunch of different hats. You are the CEO of Key Source Properties. We're going to dive into the short term rental business. Incredibly excited to talk about that. We have some exciting things cooking at my day job at Lima One Capital around short term rentals, and so it's just all the more timely that you and I connected, so we can kind of unpack so much around the short term rental space. And then in addition to that and many other things, you're one of the founding partners at 6 Degrees Real Estate. So you, my friend, are in the real estate world through and through. How in the world did you land in this beautiful microcosm?
Yes. So it was very much organic growth, the way that every good side hustle kind of turns into your main hustle. That's exactly how this started. My background is in technology sales. So I worked for some major Fortune 500 companies, and I was on the business sales side of the house. That We were introduced, my husband and I, to short term rentals right around 2015. We stayed in our first one down in Nashville, Tennessee. I was absolutely fascinated. It was like Zillow on crack, how you could not only look inside of people's houses and be nosy, but then you could also satisfy that curiosity by staying there. I mean, I had so many questions. I thought it was amazing and just didn't understand it all at the same time. So we utilized the platform, and we were at a position in our real estate investing careers where the timing was absolutely right for us to take a leap of faith and try something like this.
Mhm.
I had no idea what the Louisville, Kentucky tourism market looked like, if people even knew about this app. I had no idea what market saturation, penetration was like. So we just took a risk, furnished a property, listed it for Derby of 2015, because that's, of course, when everybody is coming to Louisville and we're on our best behavior,
Mhm.
entertaining the world. So it booked, all of May booked, all of June booked, and it just kept growing and growing. And it grew so much that we bought another house in North Carolina solely for the purpose of doing short term rentals there and using it whenever we wanted to. So, an actual vacation property.
Yeah.
So that's how we got into the business, and then we organically grew just by talking to people about the success that we were having, and they too were tired of being long-term landlords on year-to-year leases and dealing with property damage and things. And they too wanted an alternative where they could potentially make more money and have more control over their properties.
Mhm.
So as word spread, we were doing consulting, but the consulting quickly turned into management when they realized how in consuming it was and intensive it was to be a good host,
Yeah.
to make the money that you want to make. So that's how our, I guess, kind of just our investments turned into a side hustle. And then organic growth of that causes us to need to leave our jobs and fully invest time, energy, effort, and money into this business and into growing it. And we're very glad that we did. But we were new to the industry. The technology wasn't there to help us automate it. Everything was hands on. We were designing it from the ground up, because there wasn't a playbook in play yet for a business like this.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful organic story. Like you weren't searching out a real estate opportunity. You were just going to Nashville and landed in this little Airbnb thing. And fast forward 7 years later, here you are. That's such a wonderful, beautiful story. You're just not looking for anything. You happen upon it, and it's turned into like it went from side hustle to you're the guy now. You're the Derby City short term guy. So
Absolutely.
so talk to me about I guess one thing we talked about barriers to entry, right? And
Mhm.
I guess I think of let's talk about property management. That's a big piece. You mentioned property management,
Okay.
right? It sounds like that has to be one of the more challenging or frustrating differences between long-term stable leased properties and short-term rentals. Is short-term means you're turning over a property very frequently, and what, like, do you have any offhand metrics, like how, like, just across your portfolio or maybe the area, Louisville, like how frequently does a property get turned, and what does that process look like, and how do you go by way of making a decision on, am I, is the wife and I are going to jump in? Is it like, I got my dog, this, that, and the other? Like, how do we figure out kind of the sweet spot for self managing, in market, out of market? I'm throwing a million different things at you.
Yeah,
A lot of
I hope I can
caffeine this
remember them
morning.
all.
A lot of caffeine this morning, but yeah. So chop off kind of the property management piece. How do you go about deciding what the best setup is for you?
Sure. Well, it's very different if you have between 1 and 5 properties, and or maybe trying to self-manage or even use a property manager, or if you're like us and at our height before the pandemic, we had 75 properties that we were managing, and we were the fifth largest city in Louisville by number of beds. So these operations you're going to run similarly but very differently. For example, number one, there is a lot of technology out there to help the smaller operators to automate a lot of the main processes. When somebody books with you on Airbnb, it downloads directly into your calendar. It's going to block other platform calendars so you don't get double bookings, and it immediately will send them a welcome message letting them know when they're going to get their check-in instructions. We're so glad. Reach out with any questions. All of that's automated. So you no longer have to stop what you're doing and contact the guest as soon as something comes in. Additionally, that's going to show on your dashboard. So if you're curious about the success of this month versus next month, month over month, it's going to have all the reports and things in there that savvy real estate investors love. So that side of the business has very much changed since we entered it in 2015 and had none of that. Now, needless to say, I still use my own spreadsheets because nobody can give me like the exact data that I'm looking for, the exact way that I need to see it. There are probably some
Yeah.
people out there listening who are just nodding their heads because they're that type. But like, so metrics, what we look at is across our portfolio, we probably have a 65% occupancy rate. And that takes into account right now where we're at 100%, or sometimes a 95%, only because we don't allow one night stays. And eventually you're going to get little one nights in between each of your reservations that you're dying to fill, but we will not change our business model because those are always the troubled guests, one night stays. So we're running about 100% occupancy right now, with the average nightly stay being about 3 nights. So you can see that every 3 days, we're able to go into that property, make sure everything looks great, smells great, which is what all investors would love to do with their real estate. But number two, we also have to make sure our cleaners show up, that they get every single little hair out of there and not leave any behind, and then go and do that laundry too. So if you don't stay on top of that, that's going to add up. So, if you're a single operator, then you're going to want to have good cleaning companies, 3 sets of linens, something to be on the beds, something that's being laundered, and then something that's sitting on the shelf that is going to be ready to go. But definitely don't do the cleaning unless you really love cleaning, because that will be probably something very short lived, something definitely to outsource in your business for sure.
Yeah, the cleaning piece sounds like a nightmare. No,
It's
the
really the
such
hardest part of short-term rentals. I mean,
really.
even in our Facebook support groups for owners, like the one here in Louisville, that is the number one question: who has a cleaner? They're always going through cleaners. And here is an expert piece of advice, especially for the perfectionists who are out there. When you are looking for a cleaner, you want somebody who is consistent and who shows up. You do not want just the best cleaner, because it is difficult, if not impossible, to find everything that you're looking for in one person. Accept that they're human, they will make mistakes, but give a lot more credit to the people who show up when they're supposed to and do the job, so that your guests don't show up to a dirty place, versus the people who kind of leave a sock under a bed occasionally. Their hair might fall out, into the sheets or something like that. Just be realistic about that, please, or you will blow through a lot of cleaners.
That's a very grounded piece of advice, right? Yeah, I think about on the lending side of the fence, like consistency and execution is a big piece. You have price, which is very important. You have leverage, but like, can you actually deliver and execute? Because at the end of the day, like as an investor, you have timeline you have to meet, and if you're running one or hundreds of Airbnbs, you have a timeline as well. Right? Like if you
Mhm.
have you're running at that high occupancy level, you don't have a lot of room for errors. And trying to get a cleaner to come in, like, hey, my cleaner today couldn't make it, and I need somebody today because I have people coming tomorrow. It sounds like you might be blocking off your night to go clean if you can't find anybody. I mean,
It has happened quite a bit early on in our career. We were cleaning a lot on Sundays. Sunday's the biggest checkout date, and it's the day that we find that most people don't want to work, even if they aren't religious, even if they have nothing else going on. Sunday just seems to be the day to kind of chill for a minute. And that is the biggest checkout date across the board. That's when most trips end and people are headed home to then go to work on Monday. So some people block their Mondays off on the calendar so that they don't have that check in, check out on the same day.
mhm.
That's really going to save you. Monday's usually not a high money earner. And from an occupancy standpoint, except in really busy seasons, it's not a popular day for people to be coming into town.
Got it. That's on the question list. So the most unpopular day, if you had to pick one, is Monday in terms of just general activity, in, out,
Just
occupy.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, the first part of the week, unless somebody has a convention, unless people are wanting to take advantage of maybe some lower discounted rates because they don't have specific days they need to travel, then that seems to be, at least in our market, kind of the least traveled days.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Mhm.
One thing you brought up was just kind of the entry and spin up. Air DNA. You and I have chatted about Air DNA a little bit prior. Talk to me about they have. You were telling me about a pretty cool rating system they have where they'll grade. Is it they'll grade ease of entry into a market?
Yes, it's my understanding that they base their grade that they give to a particular city based on the complexity or the intensity of the regulation. So
Okay.
before Louisville passed any sort of ordinances that pertain to short-term rentals, we had an A+ rating. Since then, it's gone down to about a B-, maybe C+ right now. It's been a while since I've checked it, but that's just essentially how easy is it for you to find a legally operating short-term rental property in a market. What does the growth look like year over year? How many properties are being added to Airbnb? So they probably kind of change that metric over time, but it's a good indicator, especially if you know nothing about the market and don't have any resources there.
Yeah, that's great. Especially, I don't know, you're taking a plunge into, what is there are a lot of stable pieces of this. There are also some volatile different pieces. And the regulation piece is a big side of it, right? Like we deal
Mm-hmm.
with that. That's one of the big challenges on the lending side is, if you're writing 30-year debt, you're making a lot of assumptions, right? You have some known variables now, but you can only see so far out in the future. So what does 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road look? And regulations, like local ordinances, are changing all the time. We're in Greenville, South Carolina, our headquarters, and there's been kind of no shortage of I won't put a positive or negative swing to it, but no shortage of changes and new regulations around it, and enforcement just in any market seems to be scattered. So how do
Nobody
you?
wants to touch it. No, nobody wants to touch it. And luckily for you on the 30-year note side, most people only keep those what about 7 years before
Yeah.
they trade them in for something
Mhm.
else. So not too big of a leap there. But certainly, there are a lot of factors whenever you look at lending on short-term rentals because let's just say somebody's buying a property that's already up and running and has a great P&L. You don't take those reviews with you. Unless somebody is handing their account over to you in full, you cannot transfer that Airbnb listing over to me. VRBO, you can. Airbnb, you can't. So reviews go away. Your hosting abilities go away. So when you're starting with zero, if you're a poor operator, you're not going to be able to replicate that profit and loss that somebody who was on it, who stayed on it, who went above and beyond for their guests. So you have like varying operators at the same property who will get different results. It's not just finding a single tenant and vetting them and it's consistent income every month. Then maybe somebody was not using a property manager, somebody does. There goes 20 to 35% of your gross revenue right off the top from that P&L. So especially if, whenever you're going into a new market, the scariest thing is if you're running your pro forma numbers off of short-term rental numbers that you expect to receive, then let's say that you're not approved for it, or those ordinances do change and you can no longer operate. If you can't make the same amount that you need to in a traditional property management sense, then this isn't now not the same investment that you once thought it was. So
Right.
the laws and ordinances and understanding that and making sure they don't change, or HOAs aren't changing their laws and restrictions as well, those are all key to operating a strong business.
Yeah, it is. I think overall the sentiment from any angle, from a regulatory standpoint, from a capital market standpoint, um, from a real estate investor standpoint, like it's more the jump up in level of comfort is happening very quickly, right? So
Absolutely. Because it's
yeah,
proving itself every day to be, a great moneymaker for a lot of the operators, especially when you're in, excellent markets like, watercolor Florida, when you're on anything that's coastal, mountains, ski resorts, ski towns, places like that. And those cities change all the time. I love watching the trends of where people go. Right now, one of the big ones is above us in southern Indiana. It's called Brown County, and it's the smallest little place, but they have a great local art scene. They have breweries popping up. And so people are now investing in that for short term rentals, even looking to do like windstream parks and RV parks and things like that. So it's really changing the landscape of travel as well. And people are taking this application, not outside of the traditional single family house or duplex, and moving it into these fun, unique experiences. And the hotel industry is really trying to keep up because they're starting to design future properties, especially resort style properties, to look like short term rental communities because that's what people are starting to love so much when they travel.
yeah. I've always been a hotel person. Uh, but I've stayed in some Airbnbs, and the couple of instances I can think of, like why did I go Airbnb versus a hotel? Uh, Groups, right? If you have a big group and everybody together, I think like just any group outing, right? If
Mhm.
6, 12 people, in a lot of cases, depending on what is going on, that suits much better than breaking up everybody into hotel rooms. And then I haven't pulled the trigger on this, but just like wild uniqueness in properties, right? Like you see all around, even in northern Georgia, western North Carolina, there's some really cool, unique to the area homes. And then you go, everybody can think of just the worldwide scope of Airbnb and just some
Mhm.
wild Airbnbs that are out there. It's like there's a uniqueness play to it. So I think another kind of beautiful piece is that it fills the gap, um, that you don't think of as a gap, but it just provides a maybe a different type of product as opposed to a run of the mill hotel. You go to, each brand is similar regardless of where the property is, right? If you go to just go down the Marriott line, like if you go to a Moxie or the Ritz in Atlanta, which is close to us, like there's a similar feel to going to, same flagship properties in other cities. And Airbnb breaks it up and gives you a little more unique optionality. So I was just
Absolutely.
thinking through
We
the
like to
like my
say
why.
living like a local or staying like a local, is something that we've always said. It takes people into neighborhoods as well that don't have hotels. Some of the most popular areas in Louisville, like Old Louisville, we have a couple of bed and breakfasts, but we don't have any hotels. The
Mhm.
Highlands doesn't have any hotels, but now there are hundreds of short-term rentals, so people can actually stay in these communities. And it isn't uncommon for people to fall so in love with an area by not staying in a hotel, but kind of getting back into the neighborhoods and seeing things they wouldn't otherwise see, that it makes them want to move there. I mean, we've had this happen on more than one occasion that people relocated to Louisville because they just, had enough with, the hustle and bustle of LA, and they come here and they see that it's nice. It's a big small town, it's slower paced, and it really influenced their decision to move here by being able to stay in a short-term rental property just versus a hotel downtown in a very touristy area that isn't as
That's
appealing from a cultural standpoint.
That is so true. I was out. This is probably 2017. I was out in Phoenix ahead of IMN West, which is a big conference for us as a company. Was out there with a couple of coworkers a few days before. Like we went out. I think we flew out Friday, so we had the weekend just to hang out, and we got an Airbnb. And yeah, I can remember a lot of we were in a walkable area, and my wheels started turning. Like I could live out here. Um,
Yeah,
and then that's December when that conference is. And then I learned that it's 190 degrees out there from May through September, so that quickly fell off my list. But
that's what
yeah, that rings
snowbirds
true.
are. That's exactly what
Yeah,
snowbirds are, though. People go to
this is
Florida
true.
when it's snowing in the north, and then whenever it hits 90, 100, they go back up north, and then they rent out the house for the people who want to go down there and experience that. So you get the best of both
Yep.
worlds when you design it right.
This is true. This is very true. All right. Jonathan, do not go anywhere, please. I wanna spend some more time. We're gonna crack through another episode. I want to dive into Louisville. I want to see if you own any horses. Don't answer the question yet. Save it for the next episode. All right. If you made any money at the last Derby, saw a music video with Drake and Jack Harlow in it, so they were there having a good time. We have a lot to unpack in the next episode. But Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me on this one. You're spectacular to speak with about short-term rentals, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks everybody for listening. Take care. Tune in next week to hear Jonathan and I keep going on at it. Thanks.